Hey guys, welcome to the Lunge Lift podcast. Today we've got a fun episode in store for you. We're going to talk about 10 steps to guarantee getting injured. This is a question we get asked a lot, and how to not get injured is a question we get asked a lot. And we're going to approach the problem by inverting it. And there are some obvious answers, but hopefully there's a few fun and useful takeaways for you as well. But before we get into it, as always, a big thank you to our show sponsors, thetrainingstimulus.com. Please check out the website if you'd like to learn more about movement mechanics and read about our upcoming workshop at WIT on the 10th of December. wit-fitness.com. Use our discount code LL15 to get 15% off your purchase. And Hydro, use discount code LL20 to get 20% off your blood flow restriction apparel. Rob.
Yes.
Injuries.
Yeah. Been plagued with them over the years. And a lot of these points, I could probably pull myself out of. That's exactly why I got injured. And it's funny because once you're in it, you sometimes don't see it, or you just think, it won't happen today. It won't happen because it's me, because I'm better than that, or it's just not. It's going to be fine. But it's funny because then sometimes when I was reading through some of these points as well, how I was just like, it feels really obvious, but it's amazing that we do it anyway. So it's like, we know with the risk is so much higher, but like, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. And you're like, fuck, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is a great topic to use this. It's actually a Charlie Munger. He's a big investor guy. For those of you who haven't heard of him, he uses the problem inversion strategy. So if you want to get rich, how do you not be poor, basically? And it's a nice way to frame problem solving, and it makes the answers a little bit more obvious. So if you're trying to not get injured, have a think about how would you guarantee getting injured, and basically don't do those things. So we're going to whiz through our guide to getting injured, and hopefully from that you can infer some takeaways that help you to not get injured.
Yeah, so I think 10 points is a really nice, we've got a nice round number, 10 things to take away, and to start off with, don't warm up.
Of course. Number one, skip the warm-up, get straight into lifting heavy, no warm-up sets, don't build up progressively. If you're trying to get injured, you want system shock, you want unprepared tissues in your body, you don't want to increase blood flow or synovial fluid and have those muscles straight from the desk, straight under a heavy bar. I think that's a great way to get injured.
Do you know what that is? It's funny because even though this I feel is quite obvious, it still gets commonly done because I still watch people maybe use an empty barbell for a couple of reps and then go straight to their working set. And say, for instance, I saw this the other day and it's like empty barbell and then straight to, I think it was 80 kilos on the front squat. And I was like, what is that? What's your working set today? Oh, I'd like to kind of build to 100. I was like, okay, so you're going to go 80, 90, 100 from the bar. I was like, can we please do maybe 40 kilos first, then maybe do a couple of 60, just please, because, and it was just, and the look was just, I don't want to waste energy on that. And I think that's where warm-ups kind of get confused, and it's like, well, I've only got a certain amount of energy for the work ahead, which is true to some degree. But if you shock the body by putting 80 kilos and you've gone from 0 to 80, you're like, how the fuck? And movement qualities goes to shit. Everything just drops because you haven't had that time to prep and prime for the work ahead.
Yeah, I have to give a quick special mention to one of the listeners, Jeffrey, Big Jeff, who is the author of the Red Warm-Up, which is... red plates only, 70 kilos, 120 kilos, 170 kilos until you fail, basically. So how many reds can you get on the bar one at a time, and one rep at each of those weights if you're testing the squat? In
the squat. So, okay, so that I kind of agree with that to some degree, only because, so for instance, if I'm building up to, say 220, using that as an example, because that's when you got 4 reds on, right?
Yeah,
that's not much, so that's not enough sets, but I get that. I see this a lot. It does depend on your top end. I wouldn't recommend it, and even for myself, I would probably go, I would go bar red, then it'd probably be like, because I don't use reds, I gotta use 20s, But so it'd be like 20, so it'd be 60, 100. So I do go up in 40 kilos right up until 180, where I then go 200, then I go up in 10s rather than 20s. So I kind of get that warm up. But again, I have spent more time doing a few more extra reps on that lower loads.
Unless you're as strong as Big Jeff or Big Rob, then I would not advise the red warm up. And if you do the red warm up and you're that strong, probably a few more reps than just one.
Yeah.
What you're doing is called the blue warm up,
Yeah.
and that's for deload weeks in Jeff's books.
I love that. I love that. Jeez.
Right. Number two, how to
yeah.
get injured. Do new movements all the time.
That's CrossFit, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Do what's that reverse muscle up that everyone's doing at the moment? Just swing around the bar. That's quite a nice one. But I think the principle here is you want to randomly stress your joints and tissues in a way that they haven't become accustomed to and is totally new. Because if you're trying to catch any of your tissues off guard, you've got to keep the body guessing and do something totally random for them to be exceeded, their tissue tolerance to be exceeded.
I mean, yeah, for me, when I think about this, I say the new movement thing is, well, you need to do different movements to shock the body. And like, as you said there, but it's funny, just more weight is enough of a shock for most people. And the understanding that, okay, this is a different stimulus because I now have to brace harder, work harder for more load of the same movement. Don't get me wrong, back in the day, I definitely had some of those same thoughts of, okay, yeah, I get that. The idea of a novel stimulus thing. And I do think there is a case to some degree from obviously novelty. But continuously doing novelty, as we've kind of mentioned in previous podcasts, takes away the ability of progression. Because if it's constantly something new, you don't know if you're getting better because you're just always doing different things. So that you haven't got a chance to measure your progress. But I think having a small amount of new movements can be fun if you like just, to make your training a bit more, sporadic. But as long as you've got some kind of key foundations, then that would be great.
Sure. There's a famous Charles Poliquin quote, which is strength is gained in the range in which it's trained. And it's not 100% true. You can develop strength slightly outside of the range, but it's in a similar range and just beyond is the reality. But there's a lot of truth in this, in that if you do a long box squat cycle and then you jump straight to arse to grass, you're not going to have strength in that bottom range comparable to what you've developed in your box squat cycle. The carryover is obviously going to be a lot better if you go from box squat to maybe closer to parallel and work your way down. The muscles, tissues are going to have experienced the similar stresses of position more gradually, and you're less likely to achieve that system shock exceeding of tissue tolerance, which is required for your injury.
Yeah, and I guess if you was using the box squat example, that if you was to do a box squat cycle and wanted to go arse to grass, you'd have to then drop the load significantly to be able to control that stress in that newfound range, in that bottom range that you didn't have access to. So I guess if you're willing to have to work back up for such a long period of time to get your weight back up, then fair enough, you can do that. But I guess if you wanted to make it a more optimal, efficient way of doing it, you'd bring your weight down and then go down again from there with the loading. So then you don't lose too much of that top end strength that you've been building up with. Or you just keep back squats into full range as well as your box squats. And there we go. That's how we do it.
Yeah, not a great way to get injured there, mate. No, that's
true. That's true.
The point 3 is the almost opposite of that, in that do only one movement all of the time. So if you want to get injured, don't give your body exposure to any other positions or patterns. And what you want to do is develop extreme strength in a really narrow spectrum of movement. So yeah, if you're going to go with box squats, do box squats and only box squats, and never stray from the perfect positions. In this way, you can develop extreme strength in a really small set of movement options, and then comparatively develop some really good weakness in the neighboring positions, which means it's going to be really easy to exceed the tissue tolerance of those neighboring setups.
Yeah, when I hear this one, I kind of think of, say, like bodybuilders in a way, when we start to think about, even though they're not necessarily just doing the one movement, but what they've done is essentially cause their body to get stuck in these set positions. So then as soon as they go outside of that position, their bodies are like, I don't want to be here, and because they're then exposing themselves to a position they don't want to be in, injuries normally occur, and hence why we'd say you want to only do one movement all the time to get injured.
Spot on. So I think number 4, we want to get small or non-target muscles to do most of the work. So if you're trying to get injured, we want to take the biggest, strongest muscles out of the equation, because if we're just asking a lot, or ideally too much, from the small or poorly positioned muscles in the body, if we want to ask too much of them, then having the big prime movers out of the equation makes it much easier to exceed that tissue tolerance which is required for an injury. So try not use your glutes, try to not use your lats, try to do all your pressing with your traps and ideally rotator cuff. That is an awesome way to get injured.
Yeah, this feels so silly, but it's so true, because you just use it's right. I'm going to go into point 5, which is another way to guarantee injury has to be going too heavy, too intense, and try and PB every session. This reminds me of the like squat every day type thing, where most people they do normally put on a decent amount of strength on their squat if they see it through and if they get through it without getting injured. So because when we going back to point 3 of doing only one movement all the time, that even though you may vary your squat style and stuff, it's still the similar movement pattern. So that stress on the body, that continual loading of pushing to like your heavy ones of the day. Yeah. So what are your thoughts, mate, on this one?
Yeah, I think basically if you're trying to get injured, you want to ignore the limits of physiological adaptation. So, you might say that you can add X percentage of your strength per week, month, or year, but you want to completely ignore that and shoot for the stars. So if you want it enough, then I think you can, break world records in no time at all. Just put more and more weight on the bar, keep trying to get better every single day, because that's a reasonable expectation and you will hit your injury goal if you do that.
I love it. Now, another way to guarantee injury has to be multiple training sessions a day. So, like training 4 times a day, doing random people's workouts, following them, like going on Instagram, doing a bit of this, bit of that, doing the same things. And yeah, I think that is a guaranteed way, which is then why, when I take it from your experience as well, why people come to you and say, okay, I've tried to do it myself and it just hasn't worked. Can you please give me some direction?
Yeah, exactly. I think if you want to get a week's worth of results in a day, you should do a week's worth of training in a day. It's logical, right? So the more you can squeeze in, the faster you're going to progress. And if you want to get the results of somebody you follow off Instagram, just anytime they put up a workout, you should copy it exactly. And I'm sure in no time at all, you'll have the same level of fitness, the same physique, and probably the same number of followers. So I think that's a really good
That's where I'm going
strategy.
wrong. Fuck, I knew it. I knew I was doing something wrong. So this one hit home. Booze every night. I mean, I went through a period of boozing nearly enough every night, and I did wonder why my recovery was going to shit. I did feel terrible and all these little bits. And I think it makes perfect sense, because alcohol is a great pre-workout. And especially post-workout nutrition. Like everyone knows, so it's like Friday night pumps or Saturday day sweats. So then you're going to go and get on the booze, a load of food. It's like perfect post-workout nutrition.
Yeah. So it's something I actually hear a lot from my clients, is that their pain or injury is either exacerbated by alcohol, so the increase in inflammation, or I recently had somebody in who had a repeated calf strain, and it always occurred the day or two after heavy drinking. So if you are looking to get injured, alcohol as much as possible is going to give you the best chance of setting yourself up for injury or exacerbating your injury if you're already injured. I think the secret's really it's a mixture between the empty calories, the inflammation, and also the way that it can ruin your sleep. It's a really great way to get injured. That.
And then following on from that, I guess point number 8 is sleep. You might as well not sleep, right? Because it's the cool thing to do. No sleep.
Totally. I think, sleep when you're dead, but for now, you can, if you're doing 4 sessions a day, you need to squeeze them in somehow. And I think sacrificing sleep to get those extra workouts in is a great way to set yourself up well for injury.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough one because for instance, I know when we had Chloe, my sleep quality went to shit, and we because I didn't get much of it. And I remember I said this on the podcast before. I then decided to become a CrossFit Games athlete with you. So right, I'm going to now try and train, do all the specificity, da 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 da. And thankfully, I didn't get injured because I didn't last long enough, because I was just like, I can't recover. And it's like all of these things really did lead on from each other. And the fact it's about to come again with my second kid on the way, and you're just like, this is why my powerlifting competition is so important to me this time around, because I know I'm going to have a period of impaired training, impaired recovery, impaired everything. And it is what it is. But when it's a stress in your life that you can't control, it's very easy to say, right, I've got to keep doing what I'm doing to stay where I'm at. I keep training, keep doing everything exactly how it is, because I want to maintain all this work that I've done. But as we alluded to there, obviously, it's just a perfect potion for guaranteed injury, because it's just with that lack of sleep, you just can't recover.
Yeah, exactly. I think we'll try and get a sleep expert on at some point, but I think benefits of sleep are tremendous. Like, you hear people saying, I think Matt Fraser said, sleep is the best performance enhancing drug, or something along those lines. And I think there's a huge amount of truth in that. Like, the body just does so many things that it really needs to do during sleep. So quantity and quality of sleep have a huge impact on preparing your body for pretty much everything. So if you can remove that from your schedule, you're going to help that injury risk skyrocket.
And then point number 9, eating too little and low quality.
Yeah. So this is a key one. I think if you're training 4 times a day, you still don't want to risk putting on those extra few pounds. So sticking in the 1,000 calorie deficit would be a great way to, 1, risk not getting fat, but 2, make sure you're nice and depleted, so that you don't have the energy to concentrate and focus on your form during a session. And while you're doing this random workout of Instagram, you can really get yourself into some really sticky, bad positions under heavy load. The other thing on the quality point of view, I think, calories are calorie. So if you've only got a few calories to play with, stick to the calories that really give you joy, and focus on things like donuts, just so your body's got everything it needs to have a productive session.
I mean, I don't think I've ever had an issue with eating too little, but the low quality side I do get. I've definitely had my issues over the years, and again, I think I've massively noticed it myself in the joints. Like my joint, if I'm trying to train hard and my food quality is quite low, I just don't recover well at all. My joints hurt, everything, and it makes perfect sense, especially if you're always relying upon, say, supplementation or like protein bars to hit your protein goals rather than high quality meats and stuff. So yeah, if you want to get yourself an injury, eat not enough. And don't eat good shit either. So, last one, mate. Number 10. We have flown through these today. So, constantly compete without any preparation. This one I liked, because for me, I thought I don't constantly compete, but I do remember back in the day of always kind of pushing myself to a competitive level of my own state. So I was always, all my training sessions will always basically be mini competitions to me, always trying to, which kind of leads to the going to heavy points, to the point number 5, that always trying to PB and always trying to stress myself. And you realize that I am just competing the whole time. We did a whole episode on competing versus training versus testing. And it's really easy to get caught up in that, because when you focus on one workout at a time, then you just think, I need to hit this. This is the most important thing I need to hit, rather than looking at the big picture. So if we want to guarantee injury, we've got to constantly compete. Yeah,
I think this is a really great common strategy for getting injured. I think you've done a great job of describing the problem there, in that when you're constantly competing, you don't have your overall goals in line. If you're jumping on somebody else's session, then you're essentially trying to work towards their goals. So they might be completely different to yours.
Yeah.
And you trying to best them at their workout is, potentially taking you away from your goals, and also asking your body to do things that you haven't prepared it for through your own training. And without intending to, this point probably combines a few different of the previous points, in that you're probably not going to have done a specific warm-up if you're jumping in on somebody else's session. You might be doing new movements that you've never done before. You're probably going to go too heavy or too intense in the session because you're trying to win. I think it's a great way to combine these factors to increase your injury risk.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look back on these 10 points, they feel really silly, and I love it. And it's just made me smile the whole time we've been doing it. But and I tell you what, it's been so hard to not try and give the correct advice and just think. I realized I was like trying to it's like, well, you should do this. I was like, but this is not what we're trying to get across. And it's like, it's for us as coaches, it can be really obvious, and even us, like at times we do things, as I mentioned at the start, I've done a lot of this stuff myself, and I know it wasn't the right thing to do, but sometimes you just do get caught up in things. And a lot of these things, that if it happens like as a one-off, or every so often, it is what it is. But if you do a lot of these things quite consistently, you're going to be injured most of the time, or even worse, just have a low level stress on the body. That means you'll just never really be able to achieve your proper potential, because you're never allowing your body to get the gains that it could do, because all you're doing is stressing it. So it's been really hard, mate, to talk about this episode.
I think if in case it wasn't really obvious, we've been deliberately quite facetious. Word of the month.
Pugnacious.
Deliberately facetious to try and illustrate a point. And like Rob says, I think we've all been guilty of most of these at some point, and you learn through your mistakes. But when people ask questions about trying to not get injured, most people already know the answers, and these points are relatively obvious, but it's very easy to fall into the trap and get swept along by doing any of these habits. So the purpose of this episode was basically a humorous look at these obvious points, but hopefully by running through them in a light-hearted way, hopefully you've identified some of these points in your own lifestyle, and you can then make the decision as to whether it's worth it or not. For a small injury reduction risk, is it worth reducing your alcohol intake? Maybe, maybe not. Depends how much it is to start with, and depends how much fun you get out of it. It's a personal decision. Same goes for sleep. Same goes for how often you train. All of these things, we're just saying that they're risk factors. Doesn't mean you don't want to live a life of zero risk, because then there's zero reward. So have a think about all these different things. Are you giving them the attention you should or you want to? And are you getting the results that you like? Or are you always picking up niggles? Then maybe these are some areas that you can improve and reduce that injury risk slightly.
Yeah, I think the niggle part that kind of really, really gets to me. Like what I said to you just before you started talking there was, I think with all of these points, they really induce niggles in the body, which then normally turn into injuries. And it's like, they're normally the telltale signs of you need to do something different. And if you're not aware of all these little points, you're going to get injured, which is why obviously we've spoken about today. So we really hope you've been able to pull out at least one or two of these points that you kind of maybe do. And if you are feeling continuously niggled, or you just feel like you're not progressing, then maybe you might want to identify and see which ones you can start improving in your training to release, or outside of training, to help improve the potential for you to not get injured. So thank you for listening for today's short and sharp episode. We really hope you enjoyed it. And if you do want more episodes like this, do let us know, and we'll give us some topics, and we'll be sure to break it down even more for you and see what we can do. But thank you very much as always, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.